started with an ad posted in a subreddit so obscure I can't even find it anymore. Night attendant needed. Full pay up front, it read. The pay? $7,000 for a 2-week contract. Cash. It sounded like a scam, but the user who posted it had a verified badge and hundreds of karma. They said the job was remote, all expenses paid, and required only passive monitoring of a research site during non-operational hours. No company name, no contact info, just a P.O. box and the tagline, Ashwood Hollow never sleeps. And neither should you. It sounded like a scam, but I was broke, 2 months behind on rent, living off gas station ramen. I sent a one-line reply, I'm available. 4 hours later they answered, no questions, no interview, just a prepaid train ticket to a station I'd never heard of, Larkspur, deep in the Appalachian backwoods. The message said someone would meet me there. The train ride took 18 hours. We pulled to a stop in the middle of nowhere. No platform, no sign, just trees. This is it? I asked the conductor. He didn't look at me.
You're the third this month,
he muttered. When I stepped off, the train rolled away like it was in a hurry to forget me. I stood there, the silence swallowing everything. No wind, no birds, just me and the trees, until I heard the sound of tires crunching gravel. An old blue pickup pulled into view. The man driving it didn't smile.
You the night guy?
He asked. I nodded. He didn't speak again until we reached the gate. A rusted sign half buried in vines read, Black Hollow Research Facility, U.S. Geological Survey, property of the federal government. The truck stopped. He lit a cigarette with trembling hands. That's when he hit me with it.
This place ain't right. Whatever happens in there, follow the damn rules.
The facility looked abandoned. Moss-covered walls, shattered windows, a collapsing roof. But when I stepped inside, the lights were on. Fluorescent tubes hummed overhead. The air smelled like dust and static. Someone had left coffee on the front desk. It was still warm. I was led to a small room on the second floor, the security station. One desk, a busted swivel chair, a rotary phone, a wall of dusty CRT monitors stacked like a shrine to analog terror. On the desk was a manila folder. Inside, a facility map, a key card, and a single sheet of paper. At the top, bold and precise, Night Shift Rules, Black Hollow Research Facility, revised 1983, do not deviate. Rule 1, do not enter before 10 p.m. or remain after 6 a.m. The building knows. Rule 2, at 1:11 a.m., turn on monitor number 4 for exactly 1 minute. Do not look away. Rule 3, if you hear a knock from the east wing, ignore it. There is no east wing. Rule 4, if the phone rings before 3:33 a.m., do not answer. After 3:33 a.m., say nothing, just listen. Rule 5, if you see someone you recognize on the monitors, write down their name and then forget it. Do not attempt to contact them. At the bottom, scrawled in fading ink, if you find a 6th rule, burn it. At 9:59 p.m., the door locked behind me. I checked my phone. No signal. I checked the monitors, black screens. Then, one by one, the CRTs began to flicker on. Some showed empty hallways. Others showed stairwells I hadn't seen. A few showed nothing recognizable, rooms that shouldn't exist, or angles that couldn't be real. I stared too long at one screen, the grainy feed from a hallway labeled A4. And for a moment I thought I saw myself on the monitor, standing still, not blinking, watching me. Midnight passed. I was still alone. Until the intercom buzzed. not part of the rules, not mentioned anywhere. The speaker crackled, and a woman's voice whispered, "You don't remember yet, but you will." The line went dead. The voice had a weight to it, not loud, but definite, like it expected to be believed. It lingered in the room long after the intercom clicked off, as if some of it had gotten into the walls. I stood still for a moment, unsure what I was waiting for. Then I turned back to the monitors. One of them, monitor number 8, now showed a stairwell I hadn't seen before. It descended sharply, half-lit by flickering bulbs along a concrete wall, and then abruptly cut off into darkness. No label, no timestamp. I marked it in the logbook they'd left beside the monitor wall. That's when I noticed something strange. One of the drawers in the desk was open a crack, though I didn't remember it being that way earlier. Inside, there was a second sheet of paper folded lengthwise. Older, yellowed, brittle at the edges. I unfolded it slowly. At the top, in the same typeface as the rule sheet, was a line that hadn't been on mine. If the elevator doors open by themselves, do not get in. No one called it. There was no signature, no date, but someone had underlined the rule twice in red ink. I stared at it, then glanced at the wall map. There were 2 elevators listed, one on the east end, which I now understood didn't exist, and one in the north service wing. I hadn't explored that wing yet. I made a note. Still, the rule had a different feel, less procedural, more like a warning from someone who didn't expect to be listened to. I folded it back up and placed it inside my jacket. The facility groaned suddenly, a low, subtle strain of metal under tension. Somewhere above me, a fan kicked on, then died again. I checked monitor number 4. The screen was black. I hadn't turned it on yet, but at the bottom corner, a blinking cursor flicked in and out, almost like a text prompt. Then it vanished. I looked down at the map again. Something had been scratched into it in pencil, faint, almost erased, a circle drawn around room B12. That room wasn't connected to the rest of the hallway system. There was no visible path, just a floating room. I picked up the key card and walked to the hallway. The overhead lights flickered twice as I passed beneath them, but stayed on. The layout of the building didn't match the map. Some halls were shorter, some longer. A few doors were missing entirely. The air had a different taste out here, metallic and dry. I found the door labeled B12, but it was sealed with a keypad, no card slot. The keys were worn smooth. I walked back to the station and checked the folder again. Behind the map was a small photograph, black and white. 2 men and a woman standing in front of the facility. The back had a scribbled date, 1971, and the name Eva Abramovich written in all caps. The photograph had been torn at some point. Only half of Eva's face remained. But behind her, taped to the window of the main entrance, was a flyer I could just barely make out. Help wanted, night shift, observation only. And below it, in faded marker, bring no photographs. I turned the photo over and checked the name again. Eva. The same name the voice on the intercom had mentioned. I flipped the photograph back and forth, trying to match the entrance in the image with what I'd seen earlier. Something didn't line up. The doors were too narrow in real life, or maybe they had been changed. But there was no denying that the flyer in the photo matched the one taped to the wall near the security station. I walked back to the entrance to double check. The flyer was still there, sun-bleached and curling at the corners, but something new had been added to the bottom. A handwritten note in fresh black ink Room B12 opens from the inside. I ran my thumb over the writing. It hadn't smudged yet. Someone had been here recently. I returned to the monitors. The feed for A4 was still active, and my reflection, or double, was gone. In its place, the hallway was now empty. I scrolled through the other monitors. One of them, number 11, showed an overhead view of room B12. The lights were off, but faint movement traced along the edges of the floor. Not rats, not water, just enough motion to make it clear the room was not truly empty. A new page appeared on the desk. I didn't see it arrive. It was just there. The top read, Night Shift Addendum. If you find something written that you don't remember writing, destroy it. I looked at the logbook beside the monitors. Every page was filled, dated, signed, all in my handwriting. I flipped to the back. There were entries for dates I hadn't lived through yet. I flipped through more of the logbook, trying to make sense of the entries. Most of them were just timestamps and monitor numbers. Occasionally, there was a note beside a room code. Do not look into 5D or voided. See revision logs. But some entries were long, even rambling, descriptions of places I hadn't been, people I didn't know, written in a voice that still sounded like mine. One page described walking through a maintenance hallway I hadn't seen on the map, following a hum that wasn't electrical. Another described finding a second keycard in the back of the filing cabinet, taped beneath a false bottom. I checked. The cabinet was empty. One entry, dated a week from now, simply said, "Don't go back down. Not again." I stared at that one for a long time. The more I read, the more the entries blurred into a kind of narrative. Not a report, but a journal. Someone like me, maybe me, documenting his attempt to follow the rules while slowly realizing they weren't meant to be followed, that they were meant to keep him in line, not keep him safe. Beside the final logbook entry was a scrawled line of text, nearly illegible. If you read this, leave a mark. Without thinking, I picked up the pen and wrote a single check mark in the margin. A soft click echoed through the wall behind the filing cabinet. I waited. Nothing followed. Then there was a breath of cooler air, not from the vents, but from somewhere deeper. I pressed my ear to the wall. I could hear it now, something beyond the room. Movement, subtle and rhythmic, like metal being dragged over tile. I walked to the cabinet and gently pushed it aside. Behind it, the faint outline of a seam, a hidden door maybe, or just bad construction. I ran my fingers along the edge. One small section dipped slightly inward. I pushed. The panel gave with a groan and swung open to reveal a narrow passageway, barely wide enough for a person. At the far end, a red bulb flickered over a door marked 3C Observation. I didn't remember seeing 3C on any of the monitors. I stepped inside. The air was cooler here, not damp, not musty, but refrigerated. Every surface felt sterile, clean but unused. This part of the facility hadn't been touched in years. I reached the door and tested the handle. It wasn't locked. Inside was a small control room. No chairs, no consoles, just a thick, reinforced window facing a second room beyond, one I couldn't see clearly yet. A single control panel with two buttons, one unmarked, the other labeled Shutter. I pressed Shutter. A metal shade rose slowly. Behind the glass was a chair bolted to the floor. Thick leather straps dangled from its arms and legs. The floor beneath it was stained a dull reddish brown. Opposite the chair, a projector screen. And facing the chair, mounted on the wall, was a camera, still running. still recording. The monitor beside the panel buzzed faintly, then a window opened. Live feed 3COBS, timer 00001. It had started as soon as I'd entered. I stepped back from the glass. Something moved in the room beyond. A shape, brief, indistinct, just outside the frame. When I looked again, it was gone. I pressed the unmarked button. Nothing happened. The timer continued. I checked the logbook again. One of the later entries mentioned 3C. Don't sit in the chair, even if she asks. I left the room and shut the door behind me. The hidden passage had shifted. Where it had been straight before, it now forked. One path led back to the security office. The other, darker, dipped downward. Just above it, scrawled into the concrete in chalk, "No return past this point." I stood there a long time before turning back. When I returned to the office, the logbook was gone. In its place, a single sheet of paper, still warm, like it had just come from a printer. At the top, Rule 8. If you ever learn what happened here, you must forget it. The desk phone began to ring. I flipped to the back of the logbook. There were entries for dates I hadn't lived through yet. They were written in the same blocky handwriting. My name signed neatly at the bottom of each page. The earliest entry was dated 6 days ago, but it described tonight's events with eerie accuracy. The call on the intercom, the rule about the elevator, the flyer in the photo, even the detail about the A4 hallway monitor. All of it, word for word. I checked the next entry, dated tomorrow. It warned of a woman appearing on monitor number 4 and a loud knocking coming from inside the vents. I hadn't experienced those yet. I set the book down, unsure what disturbed me more, the fact that it existed, or the possibility that it might still be writing itself. I turned to the monitors again. Monitor number 4 now showed the circular chamber I'd seen earlier, the one with a single chair bolted to the center of the room. It was empty, but the lights were on. I stared at the screen for a long moment, checking the time. It was 1:10 a.m. Rule 2. I reached out and flicked the switch to activate the feed for exactly 1 minute. As before, the room stayed still, but just before I flipped it off, the light overhead flickered and something moved in the corner. Not a person, a shadow. It didn't cross the room. It pulled away from the walls, like it had been part of them the whole time. The screen went black at 1:12 a.m. on the dot, then it blinked just once, and the words returned. You wrote this. I didn't move, I didn't speak, just watched as monitor number 8, the one showing the stairwell, slowly dimmed to black as well. The desk phone rang. Not my cell, the desk unit. Its rotary wheel spun slightly with each ring, like it was ticking backward. I stared at the digital clock on the wall. 3:32 a.m., 1 minute early. My hand hovered over the receiver. Then I pulled back. The phone stopped ringing at exactly 3:33 a.m. A few seconds passed, then it rang again. I picked it up this time, but didn't say anything. There was no voice, no static, just breathing. Shallow, wet, as if someone were underwater or behind glass. It continued for exactly 20 seconds. Then the line cut. I replaced the receiver and found another slip of paper on the desk. This one was newer, still warm, as if it had just been printed. The top line read, "Reminder in case of error. 8. You may encounter a version of yourself attempting to escape. "Do not assist them." Underneath, someone had written, in pen, "He doesn't know which one he is anymore." I looked back at the logbook, then at the monitors. Several of them were now on freeze frame. Paused. One, monitor number 6, showed me standing in the hall outside room B12. I hadn't gone there yet. The timestamp was 4:04 a.m. I didn't go straight to room B12. Instead, I stayed seated at the desk, watching the timestamp on monitor number 6. The image remained frozen, me standing in front of the sealed door, unmoving, not reaching for the keypad, just waiting. The seconds ticked by. The image didn't change. At 4:05 a.m., the screen went black. I stood, unsure if I was chasing myself or following a script I didn't remember writing. I grabbed the key card, stuffed the most recent addendum into my back pocket, and left the station. The hallway to B12 was darker now. The overhead lights hummed, but some had gone dim, their tubes glowing only at the edges like dying stars. My footsteps echoed too long, longer than they should have, like the hallway was stretching behind me each time I moved forward. I paused outside room B12. The keypad blinked steadily. No card reader, just those blank, worn keys. I placed my hand on the door, half expecting it to be cold. It wasn't. From inside, I heard a soft mechanical click, not a latch unlocking, but something deeper, further away, as if the room had heard me and turned something on. Then came a whisper. My name. Not shouted, not spoken directly, just breathed from inside the vents. I stepped back. The logbook had mentioned this, in the entry dated tomorrow. The woman on the monitor, the knocking in the vents. Right now, it was only the voice. A single word. My name, said gently, like a memory coaxing me home. I turned and headed for the service stairwell, not running, not walking slowly, just moving, trying to stay ahead of the feeling that something was walking behind me in perfect rhythm, but a step out of sync. At the stairwell, I hesitated. I had never gone down this way before. The elevator was off limits. Rule 6 had made that clear, but the stairs weren't technically forbidden. Still, something about the handrail felt wrong. It was warm, not from sunlight or ambient heat. It was warm like it had just been held, and recently. I took the stairs down one level. That floor was colder. The air tasted like old coolant and basement dust. I passed what looked like old testing labs, long since stripped bare, gurneys pushed to corners, charting boards flipped over, empty IV stands. One door, marked simply as Theta Echo, had a fingerprint pad instead of a knob. It blinked red as I walked past. At the end of the hallway was another security station, smaller than mine. The lights inside were already on. I checked the map. This station wasn't listed. I pushed open the door. Same setup, desk, monitors, phone, logbook. But this one had a second chair, and someone was sitting in it. Back turned, shoulders hunched, a figure wearing the same kind of uniform I had on. The security patch slightly frayed at the edges. I said nothing. The figure didn't move. I walked around to the front slowly, careful not to startle them. But when I reached the other side, the chair was empty. Just a pile of clothes. My clothes. Same name tag, same stain on the collar. I backed away, and the monitors flared on all at once. Every screen showed a different angle of room B12, except now the door was open. I turned toward the hallway. The door that had been sealed earlier now stood ajar. Inside, the lights were on. Something had been written across the floor in thick black ink. Entry granted. You remember now. I stepped through the threshold, and everything went quiet. The room was bare concrete, low-ceilinged, humming faintly from the light strips embedded in the walls. It felt like walking into a pressure chamber. The sound dulled, the air heavier. In the center of the floor was a raised slab, waist-high, with what looked like a steel medical harness. Next to it stood a console, simple analog dials and switches, like something out of a Cold War bunker. On the far wall, one final monitor blinked to life. Not a security feed, just text. Cycle 47, subject active. Designation Theta Prime. Extraction status incomplete. A drawer opened in the console. Inside was a journal, plain black, no label. I opened it. It was filled with my handwriting, hundreds of entries. Most were brief, some were crossed out, but every 10th page or so, there were drawings, spirals, flowcharts, attempts to sketch the layout of the facility. On the last page was a message. When you reach this, you're ready to decide. I looked up. The slab in the center of the room was no longer empty. A person lay there, eyes closed, strapped down at the ankles and wrists, not unconscious, just waiting. As I approached, their eyes opened, and for the first time, I felt no disorientation, no fear, just recognition. It didn't speak, but I understood. Every memory, every loop, every night in this place was part of the same extraction process. Whatever the architect had designed here, it wasn't meant to contain me. It was meant to harvest me. The rules weren't protection. They were rituals. Conditions needed to stabilize the subject long enough to continue. The architect had never left. She had simply changed shape, now embedded in the systems, the walls, the logic. A voice inside the rulebook. A whisper in the intercom. I stood beside the slab, picked up a nearby stylus, and turned to the console. Below the display were two buttons. One marked Reinitialize. The other marked End Cycle. The system waited. I didn't press either. Instead, I took the rulebook from my jacket and opened to the last page. I wrote one sentence. This ends when I stop playing. Then I walked back toward the door. The lights flickered, but didn't go out. I stepped into the hallway. No alarms, no echoes. Just a long corridor, growing brighter with each step. Somewhere ahead, I heard birds. I reached the lobby. The door was unlocked. Outside, dawn had finally broken. The sky pale, trees swaying gently like nothing had ever been wrong. I walked to the road. No truck, no escort. But I had the notebook in my hand. It was blank now. The title page read, New Rule 1. There are no more rules. And for the first time, I believed it. By the time I reached the highway, the morning fog had started to lift. I walked for hours before a state maintenance van pulled over. The driver didn't ask questions. He just handed me a thermos of coffee and said I looked like I'd had a long shift. I nodded. Let him think whatever he needed to. At the next town, I paid cash for a motel room and locked the rulebook in a drawer I never planned to open again. The world felt thinner now, a film between me and everything else, but at least it was the world, real and unglitched. I tell myself that's where the story ends. I tell myself that every night. But sometimes when I pass dark glass or catch a flicker in an unplugged screen, I wonder, not about what I saw, but about what saw me back. I tell myself the rules are gone, that the loop is broken. But part of me knows this place was never just a facility. It was a pattern, and patterns don't end, they just wait. How did this story hit you? Did it get under your skin? If it stuck with you, hit the like. And remember to subscribe. The next one's on the way. Until then, sleep light.